The elderly man whimpered, pushed to the ground in a dim alleyway by thugs draped in luxury brands in the pre-dawn hours. He had nowhere to ask for help, nowhere to hide. Just then, Police Constable Serene Lim, finishing her night shift and heading home, stepped forward to block the thugs. "That's enough," she said. At that moment, Serene had no idea who this elderly man she was rushing to save truly was, nor that this encounter would turn her life completely upside down. Before we begin, please subscribe, like, and share your life's journey with us in the comments below. We wish abundant good fortune to all who found this video. It was 5:30 a.m., and Singapore in the depths of winter was still cloaked in inky darkness. The alleyways, usually bustling with human activity during the day, transformed at this hour into desolate pathways where even the streetlights flickered weakly, struggling against the gloom. Through the biting cold air, a young woman trudged along, her breath misting into white clouds with every exhale. This was Police Constable Serene Lim, 28 years old. Serene's walk home always felt like she was draped in a soaking wet blanket, heavy from head to toe. Another night had passed, enduring the rowdy shouts of drunken patrons, and it was only after an endless struggle that she could finally shed her uniform. Her legs, having endured over 12 hours of standing, felt like leaden weights, and her shoulders felt as if someone had placed heavy stones upon them. A discounted bento box with a $1 off sticker from a convenience store was the only luxury Serene allowed herself today. The bento, dangling limply in the plastic bag, was already cold, its lack of warmth eerily mirroring the stark reality of Serene's day. With each step she took on the frost-covered pavement, the biting cold seeped from her feet, climbing up her calves to her waist. Even with her winter coat zipped up to her chin, the pre-dawn wind sought out every tiny gap, finding its way in. As she walked, her nose tip red with cold, a short vibration buzzed from inside her bag. She barely had the energy to reach for it, but with a flicker of hope, she fumbled inside and pulled out her phone. The name on the screen was her younger brother, Kai. Kai had been born with a weak heart. He was rushed to the emergency room at the slightest provocation, and his condition would become critical with every change of season. Serene had gritted her teeth and joined the police force, tirelessly volunteering for night shifts to accumulate extra allowances, all for her brother's medical bills and medication. To Serene, Kai was the most precious person in the world, and at the same time, her heaviest responsibility. She opened the text message to find a short message. "Sis, I'm sorry. If I weren't sick, I'd be a source of strength for you, not a burden. You worked hard today, too. Come home safely." Serene's footsteps halted abruptly. Kai was always like that. He knew his sister was pouring her youth into his care, and he always felt heartbroken knowing she worked through the night, barely sleeping. That's why his messages always started with an apology. Her 4-year-old brother, who said sorry instead of thank you, wrote a short text packed with that apology, which weighed heavier on Serene's heart than the cold bento in her plastic bag. She wanted to reply immediately. "No, you are my strength. Because I have you, I can keep going." She wanted to send those words, but Serene's fingers remained frozen on the screen. She was so utterly exhausted that she didn't even have the energy to form a comforting word. Serena let out a short sigh and tucked her phone deep into her coat pocket. But that's when it happened. The moment she turned into a secluded alleyway, a shortcut home, a place usually quiet and deserted, a harsh shout ripped through the pre-dawn stillness. "Is this old man senile? These are limited edition sneakers. They're worth more than your life, you old geezer." Serene's entire body stiffened reflexively. Her heart began to pound faster, and her fatigue-laden senses jolted awake. The shout was followed by a dull thud, and then the muffled groan of an old man. Serena instinctively lowered her steps and pressed herself against the corner of a dilapidated wall. Peeking her head slightly into the alley, Serene's eyes witnessed this scene. A gleaming black imported car was parked at an angle in the alley. Beside it, 2 young men, dressed in clothes emblazoned with large luxury logos, were roughly cornering an old man. The mere fact that they could wear such thin, expensive clothes in the dead of winter spoke volumes about their type. Their eyes glinted with the cruel pleasure of trampling on the weak. The old man sat huddled on the ground, trembling. His worn jumper, open at the collar against the winter wind, had distinct, unidentifiable stains, and through a tear in his pants, his painfully thin legs were visible. One of the men pinched his nose with the back of his hand and spat in front of the old man. "Ugh, you really stink. Hey, hand over your wallet. We need to get some cleaning money, right?" The old man shook his head frantically, but with his back against the wall, he had nowhere left to retreat. The man brazenly shoved his hand into the old man's inner coat pocket. then snatched out a worn leather wallet, its surface peeling. He unceremoniously dumped its contents onto the cold pavement. Scraps of receipts flew in the wind, and a few crumpled dollar notes scattered weakly across the icy ground. As the pre-dawn wind tossed the notes around, the old man desperately fumbled at the ground with his dirt-stained hands, trying to pick them up. His cracked reading glasses teetered precariously on the tip of his nose as his gnarled fingertips stretched out frantically towards the notes. A gleaming shoe tip mercilessly stomped on the note, just as it was within the old man's reach. "Where do you think you're putting your hands? Huh? I'll show you." The heel of the shoe pressed down on the note, trapping it against the ground just before the old man's fingers could reach it. The old man's fingertips, unable to pull away in time, scraped between the shoe and the pavement, and a painful groan escaped his lips. His gnarled, hard-working hands, a testament to a lifetime of honest labor, were being trampled simply for trying to retrieve his own money. The man twisted his foot, grinding the note under his shoe as if to crush it, a sneer on his face, while the other man watched, arms crossed, as if it were some form of entertainment. Tears welled in the old man's eyes, tracing paths down his frozen cheeks. But there was no one else passing through this alley in the pre-dawn hours. For the old man, trapped in a dead-end alley in the middle of winter, with nowhere to seek help or hide, this moment must have felt like being utterly abandoned by the world. Serene watched the scene from behind the wall, clenching her fists. It was someone else's problem, one she could easily ignore and pass by. If she just got out of this alley, her home was only 5 minutes away. If she turned her head and quickened her pace, the dawn would pass as if nothing had happened. But the old man's image wouldn't leave Serene's mind. In that moment, something more powerful than fatigue began to stir within her. Serene quietly placed the plastic bag she was holding onto the ground. The cold bento made a small sound as it touched the pavement, but Serene heard nothing else. She adjusted her bag strap, pulled her coat zipper up to her chin, and her eyes, in the pitch-black darkness, began to shine with a steely resolve. "That's enough." Serene's voice was low, resonating in the narrow alley. She hadn't shouted loudly at all. Instead, it was unnervingly calm, almost chillingly subdued. Yet, that single sentence cut through the pre-dawn stillness like a knife, echoing clearly off the alley walls. The shoe stomping on the banknote froze, then lifted. The two men simultaneously turned their heads towards the source of the voice. Rounding the corner of the wall, stepping out of the darkness, was a young woman with her coat zipper pulled up to her chin, her eyes shining with cold determination. The men's eyes scanned Serene up and down, her slim figure, her face etched with fatigue, her hands devoid of any weapon. It took less than a second to confirm she was alone. One of the men in designer clothes snorted and took a menacing step towards Serene. He looked down at her, twisting his lips into a sneer. "What's this? Playing hero? You should just mind your own business and walk away while I'm being nice." The man took another step, his face now inches from hers. A normal person would have recoiled in fear. A lone woman, facing burly men in a deserted alley in the dead of winter. But Serene's feet didn't budge an inch. She looked directly up into the man's face and slowly reached her right hand into her coat pocket. With a practiced motion, she pulled out her phone and, with a single thumb, turned on the camera. The moment the lens glinted with light, Serene's hand, without a tremor, aimed directly at the men's faces. From that position, she slowly moved her arm, capturing the license plate of the imported car parked at the alley entrance, all in one seamless frame. This entire situation is being recorded. There wasn't a trace of tremor in Serene's voice. Each word was uttered clearly and firmly, as if the sharp senses honed from dealing with drunken individuals every night at the NPC were ingrained in her very being. "You've been caught taking the old man's wallet and stomping on his money. It's all on video." At that single statement, the men's expressions faltered for the first time. The arrogance that had dominated their faces as they lorded over the old man just moments ago was replaced by a look of bewildered surprise at this unexpected variable. The two men instinctively glanced at each other. Serene didn't miss that momentary flicker of doubt. However, bravado doesn't break easily. The larger of the men clenched his jaw and swung his arm roughly towards Serene. "Are you crazy? Put that phone away!" Under normal circumstances, one would instinctively flinch and shrink back. But Serene, instead, took another step forward. She deliberately stepped into the very space where the man's swinging arm had just cut through the air. Standing inches from the man's face, Serene's eyes were even colder than before. "I'm pressing the 999 emergency button right now." The sentence that left Serene's lips froze the pre-dawn air. This isn't a simple misdemeanor for police. Since both of you stole the elderly man's wallet and stomped on his money, you could face charges of aggravated robbery and criminal intimidation. Can you handle that? Aggravated robbery. The moment that phrase burst from Serene's lips, the men's eyes began to dart around frantically. The arrogant gaze that had been fixed on tormenting the old man now scurried about aimlessly, like mice encountering a sudden light in the darkness. As if belatedly realizing the gravity of the situation, the man's lips trembled imperceptibly. Serene gave them no quarter. She turned her phone screen towards the men, showing them the emergency call interface directly. Her thumb slowly ascended and rested on the green call button in the center of the screen. Choose. Do you want to go to the police station, pay a hefty fine, and get a criminal record? Or do you want to disappear from here right now? Serene's voice was calm, but the pressure it contained was immense. Like a judge delivering a sentence in court, Serene offered the men only two paths. You have 3 seconds. The men's faces hardened instantly. 1. Serene's thumb moved imperceptibly on the call button. 2. One of the men took a step back first. The arrogant shoes that had been trampling the old man's money were now clumsily retreating. The other also slowly turned his body, following his accomplice. Ugh, what bad luck, seriously. Let's go. He continued to act tough, cursing, but his voice had completely lost its former bravado. However, even as they retreated, their despicable nature remained. One of the men quickly snatched a few of the old man's banknotes scattered on the ground and stuffed them into his pocket. He intended to keep the money he had stolen under the guise of cleaning fees. Just as Serene was about to take another step forward, the men had already jumped into their imported car as if fleeing, and with a roaring engine, they sped out of the alley. It was only after the car's red taillights completely disappeared from view that Serene finally exhaled the long breath she had been holding. Phew. A long, white plume of breath bloomed in the cold winter air. As the tension that had gripped her entire body released all at once, her fingertips finally began to tremble faintly. To say she wasn't scared would be a lie. Her heart was still pounding furiously in her chest, and a cold sweat dampened the palm of the hand clutching her phone. But Serene hid her trembling hand in her pocket and quickly averted her gaze. She saw the old man, still huddled on the ground, his head bowed. He must have been pushed against the wall by the men, as his worn jumper had white cement dust clinging to the back. In the cold of a winter dawn, the chill from the ground would be intense. Yet the old man seemed to lack the strength to stand, remaining hunched in place. Around him, only scattered pieces of receipts, blown by the wind, lay forlornly. Serene didn't hesitate. She approached the old man, knelt down, and extended a warm hand. "Uncle, are you all right? It's all over now. Take my hand and stand up." The old man raised his head. Tear tracks were clearly visible on his cheeks, frozen by the winter wind, and in his eyes, once filled with terror, a glimmer of relief now began to seep through. The old man's rough hands, clasping Serene's, were still trembling profusely. The quiet of dawn once again descended upon the alley. In that narrow space, which had just moments ago been filled with screams and curses, now only the rough breaths of 2 people rose quietly into the air as white mist. Serene slowly helped the old man to his feet, supporting his thin arm. The old man's body heat, transmitted through her palm, was so faint it felt like holding a dry branch swaying in the winter wind. Serene carefully leaned the old man against the wall, then thoroughly checked his condition. Dirt was smudged in various places on his jumper, and his fingertips were swollen red where they had been grazed by the shoe. Thankfully, it didn't seem like any bones were broken, but suffering such an ordeal in the middle of a winter dawn was serious enough. Serene cautiously spoke. "Uncle, what those men did earlier, it's all recorded on my phone. Their faces and even their car license plate were all captured. The evidence is sufficient, so would you like to go to the police station and file a report now? I'll go with you." At Serene's words, the old man stood still for a moment, head bowed, saying nothing. Eventually, the old man slowly shook his head. "No, it's all right. I'm fine." The old man's voice was placid, but within that short statement was a deep resignation that only someone utterly weary of life's struggles could possess. His slumped shoulders indicated that he lacked the energy to endure the complex process of going to the police station, being questioned, and giving a statement, especially in the late hours of dawn. Perhaps, after living so many years, he had learned firsthand that filing a report might not change anything. Serene couldn't press him further. As much as she wanted to go with him and help him file a report immediately, she couldn't force something on the victim if the elderly person himself didn't want it. Serene silently resolved to keep the video she had taken earlier and decided to first gather the scattered belongings at their feet. The old man's possessions lay disheveled and pitifully scattered across the cold cement ground. Serene knelt again on the icy pavement and, one by one, fumbled to pick them up. The first thing she found was a pair of old reading glasses with one temple bent. Perhaps they had fallen when he was pushed by the men, as a thin crack ran across one of the lenses. A little further away, a handkerchief, faded to an unrecognizable color, lay crumpled and stuck to the ground. Beside it, a worn wallet, its leather peeled away to expose the lining, lay tumbling. Serene carefully brushed the dirt off each item. She wiped the reading glasses lens with her coat sleeve and neatly folded the handkerchief. Finally, she picked up the wallet. As she dusted the dirt off the wallet, Serene's hand paused. The partially opened inside of the wallet caught her eye. Sure enough, it was completely empty. Not a single banknote remained. Those despicable men had swept away all the money on the ground, even as they fled. They had taken the old man's entire life savings under the pretense of cleaning fees. The hollow interior of the empty wallet silently testified to the outrage that had just occurred. Serene tried to compose her expression, thoroughly dusted the wallet, and handed it to the old man. "Uncle, here, but the money in the wallet." Serene couldn't finish her sentence. The old man took the wallet with his dirt-stained hands. His expression momentarily twisted as he peered into the empty interior, but he swallowed his disappointment, let out a deep sigh, and quietly said, "Thank you, young lady. Thank you so much. I'm so clumsy with my eyes these days to have shown such a sight." It was a short remark, but it was mixed with shame, gratitude, and apology. Watching the old man's hands tremble faintly as he pulled the wallet close to his chest, Serene immediately knew one thing. This elderly man didn't even have taxi fare to go home right now. It meant that this fragile old man, with no healthy parts left, would have to walk all the way home in the middle of this winter dawn. Serene's right hand unconsciously reached towards her trousers pocket. Her fingertips felt the crumpled texture of paper. 2 $10 notes. Money she had put aside yesterday morning before work. Kai's heart supplements were due to run out this week, and she had planned to buy a new bottle from the pharmacy after catching some sleep. The moment those $20 touched her fingertips, Serene's mind was crammed with harsh numbers. These $20 could buy Kai's supplements, or they could go towards her phone bill, which was 10 days overdue, or they could be used as transport fare for Kai's next regular checkup next week. To Serene, this money was not just 2 pieces of paper. It was a fragment of survival, barely filling the gaps in her tight budget. Spending this money meant she would have to forego the supplements for this month, and frankly, her own meal expenses for the week would become precarious. Serene's fingers, fidgeting with the notes in her pocket, paused for a moment. Her brother's face flashed across her mind. Kai's weak smile, always uttering "Sis, I'm sorry," flickered before her eyes. The red numbers on the overdue bills and the empty bank balance also swiftly crossed her mind. But just then, the figure of the old man standing beside her entered Serene's vision. His gaunt shoulders were hunched against the winter wind. The piercing wind seemed to seep through the gaps in his worn jumper, making his entire body tremble ceaselessly. In this winter dawn, without any money, how on earth was this elderly man going to get home? The moment she saw him, the calculator in Serene's mind stopped. She decided to bury her brother's face and the numbers on the bills deep in her heart for a moment. Serene pulled out the 2 crumpled $10 notes from her pocket. Then, she quietly placed the notes on the old man's rough, dry palm and gently covered them with both her hands. "Uncle, it's not much, but please take this. It's very late. Please take a taxi home with this money, okay?" The old man's eyes widened. The moment he felt the texture of the notes on his palm, he was startled and shook his head vigorously, waving his hand. "No, young lady, how can I take this precious money from you? I'm really fine, I can walk. My home isn't that far." The old man's voice was filled with embarrassment and apology. His pride wouldn't allow him to accept money from a young lady so much younger than himself. But Serene didn't back down. Instead, she gripped the old man's hand more firmly and added a hint of playfulness to her voice. "No, I'm giving it to you for my own peace of mind. I'm getting my night shift allowance today, so I have some extra money." It was a lie. Serene herself knew best how low her bank balance was, but even as she told the lie, Serene forced a bright smile. She hid that small lie behind her smile so that the old man wouldn't feel apologetic or burdened. The old man quietly looked up into Serene's clear eyes. After a long moment of silent gazing, faint moisture welled in the corners of the old man's eyes. The old man couldn't possibly not know that this young lady, whose own financial situation didn't seem abundant, was worrying about a stranger she had just met more than herself. In a world as cold and stark as today, How could such a young person, who seemed to be struggling to make ends meet, possess such a warm heart? A faint warmth of the world, long forgotten, began to rekindle in a corner of the old man's heart. The old man could no longer refuse and deeply bowed his head, embracing the money with both hands. Thank you. Thank you so much, young lady. Serene waved her hand lightly as if to say it was nothing, then helped the old man towards the main road. Just then, a taxi with yellow headlights approached in the distance. Serene raised her hand to hail the taxi, and only after personally ensuring the old man safely got into the back seat did she close the door. Uncle, please go home warm. Take good care of yourself, okay? Through the taxi window, the old man repeatedly bowed his head and waved his hand. The taxi glided away into the pre-dawn streets, its red taillights growing smaller and smaller until they finally disappeared into the darkness. Only then did Serene put her hand into her empty pocket. The spot where the crumpled notes had been was now forlornly empty. Kai's supplements for this month would have to be pushed to next month. Perhaps Serene herself would have to cut back on her own meals this week. But it was strange. Her pocket was clearly empty, yet her heart felt somehow lighter. Instead of regret, a quiet sense of satisfaction gently spread within her chest. Serene picked up the plastic bag she had placed on the ground and resumed her walk home. The biting wind still nipped at her cheeks, but a small smile played on Serene's lips. Days passed. On her off day, Serene went to the bank to take care of overdue tasks. Utility bills were piling up, and she needed to inquire about a small loan to cover Kai's hospital bills for the next month. Pushing open the bank doors, the lobby, approaching lunchtime, was bustling with people. She took a queue number and saw nearly 20 people ahead of her. Serene silently sighed and sat down on a corner chair. That's when it happened. At the kiosk near the entrance, Serene spotted the back of an elderly man, his confusion evident. Perhaps daunted by the complex menu and small text on the screen, he kept taking out and adjusting his reading glasses from his pocket, unable to press a single button, standing there awkwardly. The screen repeatedly timed out and returned to the start, and the old man's hands trembled increasingly. The problem was the queue of people behind the old man. As one or two more people joined the line, irritated sighs began to emanate from various directions. Someone deliberately coughed loudly, and from the back, a grumbling voice could be heard saying, "Can't you be a little faster?" Did the old man hear those sounds? His shoulders hunched even more. His fingers, reaching for the screen, trembled more and more, and cold sweat began to bead on his face. Serene found herself getting up from her chair and walking towards the kiosk. "Uncle, can I help you?" At the soft voice, the old man raised his head. The moment their eyes met in the air, Serene's eyes widened. "Oh, Uncle." Despite wearing a clean winter coat instead of his worn jumper, the eyes behind the reading glasses were unmistakable. It was the very same elderly man who had been harassed by thugs in a dark alley a few days ago in the dead of winter. At Serene's surprised exclamation, the old man's eyes also widened. "Ah, aren't you the young lady from that day?" To meet the savior who had rescued him from a dark alley and even given him taxi fare just a few days ago. In such a place, the old man's complexion brightened instantly. His shoulders, which had been hunched in embarrassment, straightened, and wrinkles formed around his eyes as a happy smile spread across his face. Seeing the old man's joy, as if he had reunited with a long-lost family member, Serene also found herself smiling. "Uncle, were you all right after that day? Are your hands better?" "Ha ha ha. All better, all better. Thanks to you, young lady, I got home safely that day. Thank you so much." Genuine gratitude was evident in the old man's voice. But Serene decided to first solve the immediate problem the old man was facing. Looking at the kiosk screen, she saw he was stuck, unsure which service to select from the number ticket menu. Serene skillfully operated the screen, explaining each step carefully at the old man's eye level. "Uncle, you just need to press this button here. Then a screen for your PIN will pop up, but I won't look, so please take your time to enter it." Serene didn't rush. She stood in front of him, blocking the impatient stares and annoyed sighs coming from behind. Every time the old man pressed a button, she encouraged him with, "That's right, you're doing great," and she informed him of the next step each time the screen changed. Like a school teacher guiding a student, Serene's voice remained gentle and patient throughout. After successfully completing his transaction, the old man sighed in relief and repeatedly grasped Serene's hands. "Thank you so much. Whenever I see these machines, my mind goes blank. I can't always ask my children for help, and when I try to do it myself, I get flustered." A touch of loneliness was present in the old man's voice, but he quickly brightened his expression and tightly clasped Serene's hands. "Today, I truly want to treat you to a meal. Please, don't refuse. That day, you just took the taxi fare and left without even telling me your name. You don't know how much it weighed on my mind." The old man's eyes were full of earnestness. Serene hesitated for a moment. In truth, she still had bank errands to run, and she didn't think she had done anything remarkable enough to deserve a meal. However, she couldn't bring herself to ignore the old man's pleading eyes. "Okay, but just something simple then." When Serene accepted, the old man's face lit up. He pointed to a neat local restaurant near the bank and tried to head in that direction. But Serene once again observed the old man's worn shoes and modest attire. The empty wallet she had seen in the alley that morning came to mind. If I let him go to an expensive place, it'll just make his financial situation harder. Serene smiled mischievously and pointed to a red hawker stall visible outside the bank. "Uncle, actually, I've been craving spicy wonton mee since this morning. Would you mind having it with me there? It's my favorite stall." At Serene's words, the old man initially looked puzzled, but then, as if he had read Serene's true intentions, he smiled quietly. This young woman's thoughtfulness, choosing a humble hawker stall instead of a fancy restaurant, once again warmed the old man's heart. Sitting side by side on red plastic chairs in the steamy hawker stall, the two looked like an unlikely pair. An old man in a worn coat and a young woman with a face etched with fatigue, sitting opposite each other with a plate of wonton mee between them. Yet, the atmosphere between them was warmer than any other table in the hawker stall. Serene used her chopsticks to generously transfer some wonton mee to the old man's plate. The old man took a piece of wonton mee that Serene had chosen for him, put it in his mouth, and smiled contentedly. As the warm, savory, and slightly spicy flavor of the wonton mee spread in his mouth, the cold memory of the pre-dawn alley a few days ago seemed to slowly melt away. The old man slowly put down his chopsticks and looked at Serene. He couldn't have failed to notice the young woman's deep thoughtfulness in deliberately choosing affordable street food for his sake. Her courage shown in the alley was remarkable enough, but then there was the warm gesture of giving him taxi fare, and today, her endless patience at the kiosk. To think there was a young person in the world who used her heart with such warmth. Faint ripples of emotion stirred in the corners of the old man's eyes. The hawker stall canopy created an entirely different temperature from the outside world. Steam wafted from the bubbling wonton mee pot, filling the tent, and through the steam, their modest laughter gently spread. The old man's expression, which had been so intimidated at the bank kiosk earlier, was now completely gone. He sat with a relaxed face, as if meeting an old friend. "Oh, this is quite delicious. To think I'd be eating street wonton mee at this age." The corners of the old man's lips curved upwards, deepening the fine wrinkles around his eyes. His expression was so contented, he looked like a father, enjoying an outing with his grown daughter. The old man soon put down his chopsticks and quietly looked at Serene. His gaze became a little more serious. "Young lady, you have such a warm heart. In a harsh world like today's, why are you so good to an old man like me?" It was a blunt but sincere question. The old man's voice contained more than simple curiosity. It held an earnest desire to know what truly lay within this young woman's heart. Serene, perhaps embarrassed by his gaze, wrapped her hands around her cup of fishball soup and lightly scratched her head. "Oh, I'm not that great a person, uncle. It's just my nature. I can't ignore it if I see something." Serene tried to dismiss it casually, but the old man wouldn't back down easily. "No, that is great. In today's world, who readily steps in for someone else's problems? Especially in the early morning, when it's dangerous, and you're tired yourself. Most people can't do that." "That's true." At the old man's firm words, Serene's eyes reddened slightly. In truth, most of the remarks Serene had heard during her police career were along these lines. "Why are you so late? Is this all you can do? Don't you know how precious taxpayer money is?" Dealing with complaints and being pressured by superiors was her daily routine. For someone like Serene, it had been a very long time, or perhaps even the first time, that someone genuinely recognized her actions and praised her. Serene took a sip of the fishball soup. As the warm soup flowed down her throat, she felt as if a deeply locked door somewhere in her heart had opened slightly. Serene put down the paper cup and spoke in a low voice. "Actually, I'm a police officer, though I'm in plain clothes right now." The old man's eyes widened. The hand reaching for a piece of wonton mee froze in midair. "Police? You are?" "Yes, I'm a PC at an NPC, still a rookie." Serene smiled shyly. The old man gazed intently at Serene's face for a long time, then let out a sigh of admiration. "A police officer? No wonder you didn't even flinch in front of those hooligans that morning." "Remarkable. Truly remarkable." At the old man's sincere praise, Serene bowed her head, fiddling with the rim of the paper cup with her fingers. She felt herself too, how sweet that one word of remarkable was, sweeter than 10 vitamins, as it seeped into her heart. A moment of silence passed. The bubbling sound of the wonton mee pot filled the hawker stall. Serene unconsciously touched the inside of her coat pocket. There, a small keyring was attached. It was a metal keyring in the shape of a police cap, half-worn and difficult to discern its original form. My father was a police officer. Serene's voice dropped a tone. The old man quietly put down his chopsticks, which had been reaching for the wonton mee. When I was little, I think I was 7 or 8, I once found an old notebook in my father's drawer. On the first page of that notebook, the word integrity was written in very large letters. Serene's eyes gazed into the distance. It was a look as if she was seeing a scene from a long-ago childhood, not the present moment. At the time, I didn't know what that word meant. I just thought those 2 bold letters my dad pressed down on were beautiful. I found out later when I grew up why my dad wrote that word on the very first page of his notebook. Serene's voice trembled slightly but quickly continued calmly. My father worked at a police post for almost 30 years. He never got a big promotion or became famous, but whenever something happened in the neighborhood, people would always look for my father. When grandmothers fell on the street, he was the first to run to them. When children got lost, he would search the neighborhood all night. He was always someone who took other people's problems as his own. Serene took the keyring out of her pocket and placed it on her palm. The small metal ornament in the shape of a police cap faintly glittered under the hawker stall's yellow light. This is my father's keyring. I found it when I was sorting through his belongings after he passed away, and I haven't taken it off since. The old man listened to Serene's story without saying a word. A quiet and deep atmosphere flowed between the two, as if the chatter of other customers in the hawker stall had faded into the distance. Serene put the keyring back in her pocket and chuckled softly. I became a police officer because I wanted to be a wonderful person like my dad, someone who could be a small but strong force for others. That word integrity that my dad wrote in his notebook, to me, it's like a legacy my dad left behind. Faint moisture welled in Serene's eyes, but a smile played on her lips. It was an expression mixed with complex emotions, sadness and pride, longing and warmth. The old man listened silently, never interrupting Serene as she spoke. It wasn't a story about impressive academic achievements or a high salary. It was about Serene's eyes, filled with a pure desire to help others and an honest aspiration to uphold her father's legacy, embodying that clear light. Looking at that light, the old man felt a deep resonance in his heart. To think that such a young person still existed in this world, someone without money, without connections, struggling to even take care of herself, yet living with those 2 words, integrity, in her heart. A look of resolve flickered in the old man's eyes. A desire to protect this clear light from being dimmed by the harsh winds of the world began to quietly take root in the old man's heart. The old man reached across the table and gently clasped Serene's hand, patting it. Your father must have been a very good man, and to have a daughter who has inherited his heart so completely, he must surely be proud of you in heaven. At the old man's warm words, the tears Serene had been holding back gently streamed down her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand, smiling shyly. Oh, uncle, you almost made me cry. I shouldn't cry while eating wonton mee. The old man laughed along with her. The laughter of the 2 people in the hawker stall rose lightly with the steam from the wonton mee. Before they knew it, the bottom of the plate was clean, with only red sauce stains remaining. The soup cups were empty, and the hawker stall auntie was slowly starting to clean up. The 2 stood up and stepped out of the stall. The cold winter air brushed against their cheeks, but perhaps because the warmth of the wonton mee still lingered in their stomachs, it was much more bearable than before. Serene smiled brightly at the old man and bowed her head. Uncle, thank you so much for the wonton mee today. Next time, I'll treat you to something even more delicious. Until then, please take good care of your health, okay? Understood? The old man nodded repeatedly at Serene's bright greeting and waved his hand. Yes, thank you, Serene, young lady. We must meet again, definitely. Serene waved one more time and turned away. The old man stood there for a long time, watching Serene's light footsteps as she crossed the pedestrian crossing. The winter wind ruffled the hem of the old man's coat, but he didn't seem to feel the cold. Serene. Serene. The old man softly muttered her name as he watched Serene's retreating figure. A warm and lingering impression, like the red wonton mee, remained in the old man's heart for a long time. Amidst the red canopy of the hawker stall fluttering in the winter wind, The humble yet special meeting of two people quietly concluded, unaware of what would happen the very next day. The next morning, Serene arrived at the neighborhood police center, NPC, as usual, changed into her uniform, and was checking the duty report. She sighed in relief at the report that the night had been quiet with no major incidents and was about to brew a cup of coffee. The winter morning sunlight outside softly broke against the NPC office window, and Serene was enjoying a pleasant morning, recalling the contented smile of the elderly man she had shared wanton me with yesterday. But suddenly, a loud clatter of shoes echoed from the NPC entrance. It wasn't the sound of just one or two people. Fast, rough, and angry footsteps reverberated through the corridor, followed by a sharp female voice that shook the entire building. "Where is that policewoman? The woman who did this to my son's arm. Bring her out right now." Serene reflexively turned her head. The NPC lobby was in chaos. A middle-aged woman with a luxurious branded bag was shouting at the reception desk, and beside her stood the two men Serene had encountered in the alley a few days ago. They were the very same thugs in designer clothes who had been harassing the old man that pre-dawn morning. One of them had his arm in a cast, and Serene had no idea when or how he had gotten it. She hadn't inflicted any such injury during their standoff in the alley. But what truly froze Serene's gaze was the presence of a man standing behind the group. Dressed in an expensive cashmere coat and wearing elegant glasses, he stood with a haughty chin lifted. He was a prominent local businessman, rumored to have his hands in every lucrative venture in the area, from construction to entertainment. In other words, the thug's father. The man stood in the middle of the lobby, surveying his surroundings with a commanding gaze, as if this were his own living room. The person who rushed out from the interior, having heard the commotion, was the station inspector, "Oh, I see," of the NPC. The station inspector, who had come out hurriedly wondering what was happening, froze the moment he recognized the man's face in the lobby, and his complexion visibly paled. In truth, the station inspector had a weakness that others didn't know about. A few years ago, he had received a substantial bribe from this local businessman, a large sum received in exchange for quashing an investigation. Since then, the station inspector had been in a position where he couldn't raise his head in front of this man. "Oh, Mr. Lee, what brings you here? To think you'd come in person." The station inspector's voice rose an octave, and a servile smile spread across his face. The authority he had exerted over his duty officers just moments ago had completely vanished, and he stood bowing deeply, like a junior employee summoned by his boss. Serene couldn't hide her bewilderment at this sight. It was as if the man had instantly transformed, so much so that she wondered if he was truly the station inspector she served under. Just then, the man with the cast pointed a finger at Serene and screamed, "It's her! This woman intimidated us that night." She approached us, hiding her police identity, and used excessive force. "My arm is like this because of her. What are you going to do about it?" Serene's eyes widened. Excessive force? Serene hadn't laid a single finger on the men in the alley that morning. She had only recorded them with her phone and issued a legal warning. There had been no physical contact whatsoever. Serene couldn't possibly understand where that cast had come from. It was clearly fabricated. Serene tried to calmly explain the situation. "Inspector, I have the video recording of that day's situation. I did not use excessive force at all. On the contrary, these gentlemen were harassing an innocent old man." But before Serene could finish her sentence, the station inspector cut her off mercilessly. "PC Lim, what kind of disgrace is this?" There was no longer a servile smile on the station inspector's face. Instead, fiery anger blazed in his eyes as he glared at Serene. But Serene couldn't know the real reason for that anger. The station inspector's true fear was that Serene would escalate the matter and his own corruption would be exposed. "How dare you threaten Mr. Lee's son? Do you even know what you've done? How could you dare to intimidate the son of Chairman Lee?" Serene had something to say. She had video evidence, and she remembered the situation that day precisely. But the station inspector gave Serene no chance to speak. Serene looked around, seeking help. Her fellow police officers, with whom she shared the same office every day, were nearby. But not a single one of them met Serene's gaze. Some fixed their eyes on computer screens. Some pretended to rummage through piles of documents, while others even turned their heads to look out the window. It was obvious that they, too, would face repercussions if they fell out of the station inspector's favor. Serene was completely isolated, as if surrounded by walls in the middle of the NPC. Just then, the prominent local businessman slowly approached the station inspector. He lightly patted the station inspector's shoulder and spoke coldly, as if to an old friend. I've already finished talking with the commissioner. We can't have such lawless police officers in our neighborhood, can we? Let's just wrap this up with a suitable apology and her dismissal. Wouldn't that be best for everyone? Dismissal meant stripping Serene of her uniform. It meant expelling her from the police force. The station inspector, as if waiting for those words, yelled at Serene. PC Lim, did you hear that? You caused this commotion. You take responsibility for it. Apologize to them immediately and prepare your resignation letter. Otherwise, I'll make sure you're terminated. Be warned. Resignation. Termination. The moment those words hit Serene's eardrums, she felt as if her breath had stopped. Serene bit her lip tightly in indignation. She clenched her fists so hard that her fingernails dug into her palms, but she couldn't stop trembling. She barely managed to suppress the tears that threatened to burst forth if she didn't clench her teeth tightly. This uniform, which her father had been so proud of, this uniform she had worn with the word integrity from her father's old notebook in her heart, felt like it had instantly become a symbol of shame and humiliation. She had only done what was right and natural. She had simply summoned the courage not to pass by an old man being cornered in a pre-dawn alley. And the result was termination? Serene blankly stared down at the rank insignia on her shoulder. The small, simple PC insignia glimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. That small metal piece, which Serene had so desperately wanted, for which she had studied late into the night, now weighed 1,000 pounds on her shoulders. In a corner of the lobby, the cast-wearing man exchanged glances with his accomplice. His laughter mingled with the station inspector's reprimand, filling Serene's ears. Her colleagues still averted their gazes, and Serene was utterly alone in the middle of the NPC. Serene stood speechless before the cold wall of reality. The warm time spent just yesterday, sharing wanton me and talking about her father's integrity, felt distant, like something from another world. Then, a single tear traced a path down Serene's cheek silently, but she didn't even have time to wipe it away. Leaving the station inspector's verbal abuse and the thug's contemptuous laughter behind, Serene barely managed to retreat to a corner of the office. Her heart felt like it would explode. Indignation, anger, and despair surged all at once, and her hands trembled so violently that it was difficult even to pull her phone out of her pocket. Serene's trembling fingers dialed Marcus's number. After 2 rings, Marcus's gentle voice came through. "Serene, what's wrong? What happened?" The moment she heard his voice, Serene barely swallowed the tears that threatened to burst forth and managed a short reply. "Marcus, our parents' dinner this week. I don't think I can make it. I'm sorry." "What? What are you suddenly talking about, Serene? Is something wrong, Serene?" Marcus's urgent voice poured through the receiver, but Serene couldn't continue. If she said one more word, she felt she would burst into tears. Serene pressed the call end button, cutting Marcus's voice short. After that, Marcus called 3, then 4 more times, but Serene didn't answer once. She knew if she did, her resolve would waver. Serene set her phone to silent and tucked it deep into her pocket. A little later, Serene pushed open the police station door and stepped outside. The moment she took a step, cold rain began to pour from the sky, without warning. It was winter rain, not snow, but thick raindrops, like a sudden shower, pounded on the asphalt. She had left her umbrella in her locker, but Serene didn't even think of going back to get it. No, it would be more accurate to say she couldn't think of it. The events that had just unfolded inside the office kept replaying in her mind, and she couldn't think of anything else. Cold rainwater streamed down her hair, soaking her forehead, past her neck, and down her spine. The thin coat she wore over her uniform quickly absorbed the water, becoming heavy and drooping. Serene didn't stop. She felt if she stopped, she would collapse. Serene stopped in the middle of the road. Rain lashed at her face, but she didn't close her eyes. She looked up at the sky. The winter rain pouring through the gray clouds filled Serene's vision, and through it, her father's face vaguely appeared, then faded as if washed away by the rain. Sirene. From a distance, someone called Serene's name, their voice cutting through the sound of the rain. At first, she thought it was a hallucination, but the sound grew closer, followed by footsteps pounding through the rain. It was Marcus. He was running at full speed, holding a large black umbrella in one hand and clutching the hem of his coat with the other. He had come to the NPC immediately after receiving Serene's call, worried. Arriving in front of Serene, Marcus gasped for breath and tilted the umbrella towards her. Rain began to soak one of Marcus's shoulders, but he didn't care. He cupped Serene's wet shoulders with both hands and asked urgently, "Serene, why are you letting yourself get soaked in the rain? You didn't answer my calls. What happened? Why do you look like this?" The moment Marcus's worried voice reached her ears, something hot welled up inside Serene's eyes. The tears she had been holding back threatened to burst forth, but Serene didn't cry. She couldn't cry. If she cried, her heart would weaken, and if her heart weakened, she wouldn't be able to say what needed to be said now. Instead, Serene coldly pushed Marcus's hands away. "Marcus, let's reconsider our marriage." Marcus's expression hardened. The hand holding the umbrella trembled slightly. "What? What are you suddenly talking about? Please cancel our parents' dinner this week, too." Serene's voice was firm, but Marcus didn't miss the tremor hidden behind that firmness. Serene couldn't bear to look at Marcus's face, so she fixed her gaze on the ground. Water flowed from the tips of Serene's shoes onto the rain-soaked asphalt. "I might get fired from the police force." That was the first thing that burst from Serene's lips. "Today, at the NPC, they told me to resign. They even said I could be terminated. Even though I didn't do anything wrong, I'm powerless, so I just have to take it. That's my situation." Serene clenched her fists and continued speaking. A liquid, whether rain or tears, streamed down her cheeks, but Serene didn't wipe it away. "I can barely take care of myself. There's no money in my bank account. I'm struggling with Kai's hospital bills and medication every month, and my debts aren't decreasing. With a sick brother, if I'm by your side, I'll ruin your life too, Marcus." Serene's voice grew fainter. The last sentence was almost a whisper. "Marcus, you deserve to meet a good person. Not someone like me. Someone who won't be a burden to you. Someone who can make you smile." Serene turned her head. She felt if she looked at Marcus's face any longer, her resolve would crumble. Her back, standing in the rain, looked so desolate, as if the loneliest person in the world stood there. But Marcus didn't back down. He once again firmly grasped Serene's trembling shoulders with both hands. Serene tried to pull away, but Marcus's hands were firm. His will to never let her go was clearly contained in that grip. "Serene Lim." Marcus called her name. It was a serious, firm voice, devoid of any playfulness. Marcus's grip on Serene's shoulders tightened. "Did you really see me as someone so weak?" Serene raised her head. Their eyes met. Over Marcus's rain-soaked face, unwavering eyes looked directly at Serene. There was no disappointment, no anger in those eyes, only a deep, firm affection for Serene. "What you did was absolutely not wrong. I know. You would always do what's right. I trust you. That's the Serene Lim I love." Marcus's voice cut through the sound of the rain, ringing out clearly. "If we don't have money, we'll earn it together. If your brother is sick, we'll take care of him together. That's what marriage is about, isn't it? Is love only about being there when things are good? Love is about being there when things are tough." Tears streamed down Serene's eyes. This time, she couldn't hold them back. Tears mingled with rain flowed down her chin, but Serene no longer turned her head. "And my father, he's a man who has always been accurate in judging people. If he knows my true feelings, he'll cherish you even more than me. I guarantee it." Marcus brushed Serene's wet hair back with his hand and said, "Let's just go. Let's go to the parents' dinner and tell them everything. Don't run away. There must be a way." "No, I'll create a way." "All right." Serene's heart wavered at Marcus's unwavering gaze, but the wall of reality remained high. A police officer on the verge of termination, a breadwinner struggling with debt, a sister who had to care for her sick brother. Was it truly the right thing to go to the parents' dinner carrying all this weight? Serene was still unsure. Still, Marcus's hands were warm. A warmth beyond mere body heat radiated from his hands, enveloping Serene's rain-soaked cold shoulders. Eventually, Serene nodded, very slightly, almost imperceptibly. Marcus exhaled a sigh of relief at that small nod and tilted the umbrella deeper over Serene's shoulders. The two walked side by side in the rain. Even under Marcus's umbrella, a storm was still raging in Serene's heart, but at least physically, she was no longer getting soaked. After parting ways with Marcus and returning home, Serene took off her wet clothes, put them in the washing machine, and took a hot shower. But no matter how hot the water, the chill that had seeped into her heart wouldn't melt away. When she stood in front of the mirror, drying her hair with a towel, her own reflection met her eyes. Her makeup-free face, washed by the rain, her bloodshot eyes, her pale complexion devoid of any vitality. Serena took out her only dress from the drawer, hung it on a hanger, and stared at it for a long time. Marcus's words came back to her. "There must be a way. I'll create a way." Serene knew well how grateful and comforting those words were, but gratitude and reality were different matters. No matter how much Marcus tried to find a way, he couldn't stop Serene's termination. How could Marcus, a regular office worker, stop what the station inspector and the local tycoon were pushing for, hand in hand? And even if she avoided termination, the money problems would remain. Kai's hospital bills, overdue utility bills, mounting debt. No matter how deep Marcus's love, asking him to carry these burdens too would be selfishness, not love, Serene thought. Above all, what weighed heaviest on Serene's heart were Marcus's parents. She had never met them before. What parents would be happy to learn that their son's fiancé was a poor police officer on the verge of termination? What parents in the world would welcome with open arms a daughter-in-law burdened by debt and a sick brother? Marcus had said his parents would understand, but Serene thought that was something a son could say, and reality would be different. It would be better to tell them everything honestly at the parents' dinner. Not hide anything, not embellish anything, just show them my situation as it is. Then his parents will be the first to stop this marriage. That would be the cleanest way for Marcus and his family. Serene organized her thoughts that way. She had nodded in front of Marcus, but internally, she had already made up her mind. I'll lay everything bare at the parents' dinner and gracefully withdraw. That's the last courtesy I can offer Marcus, Serene whispered to her reflection in the mirror. Just hold on until the parents' dinner. A deep sigh filled the quiet room. The day of the parents' dinner dawned. Since that day in the rain when she told Marcus to reconsider their marriage, Serene hadn't slept comfortably for a single night. Every night, she stared at the ceiling, repeating the same thoughts. Was it truly right to go, even though she had promised? Was it right to let Marcus go? The conclusion was always the same. Today, I will tell them everything and withdraw. With that resolve firmly in her heart, Serene left her home. But despite her firm resolve, the moment she stepped into the hotel lobby, the venue for the parents' dinner, Serene felt her breath catch in her throat. The chandelier lights pouring from the ceiling reflected off the marble floor, dazzling her eyes, and soft classical music filled the lobby. The polite greetings of the hotel staff at the entrance only made Serene feel more intimidated. It felt as if her being in such a place was completely out of character. Marcus held Serene's hand as they walked down the corridor. Along both sides of the long corridor, luxurious framed artworks and soft lighting stretched endlessly. To Serene, that corridor felt like a never-ending tunnel. The further they walked, the more her chest tightened, and the strap of her bag became damp with sweat in her hand. Serene repeated the same words over and over in her mind. Just hold on today. I'll tell them everything today, and let Marcus go. That's the last courtesy I can offer. Serene clung tightly to that resolve in her heart, taking heavy steps one by one. Marcus stopped in front of a private room. Standing before the heavy wooden door, low voices could be heard from inside. Marcus turned to Serene and smiled reassuringly, but Serene's heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst through her chest. The door opened. Inside the room, a neatly set table awaited, and beyond it, two people sat side by side at the head of the table. They were Marcus's parents. His mother wore an elegant Peranakan-style dress, and his father, dressed in a crisp navy suit, held a teacup. The room was filled with the subtle aroma of tea, and a luxurious tea set was neatly arranged on the table. Serene couldn't bring herself to raise her head. With her gaze fixed on the floor, she bowed deeply to greet them. "Good evening, I am Serene Lim," her voice trembled. No matter how firm her resolve, just introducing herself in this setting made her throat constrict. The thought that she would soon have to lay bare her entire situation before these people and declare her intention to give up the marriage made her legs tremble. "Serene, please lift your head," Marcus whispered quietly. Serena managed, barely, to lift her head. Her gaze passed the teacups on the table, then the sleeves of the suit, and finally landed on the face of the middle-aged gentleman sitting at the head of the table. In that instant, Serene's eyes shook uncontrollably. The distinguished gentleman, dressed in a neat navy suit, sending a gentle gaze over his elegant glasses. Instead of the worn jumper, he wore a well-fitted luxury suit, but his eyes were those Serene could never forget. They were the eyes that had been huddled on the ground, being assaulted by thugs in a dark alley in the dead of winter a few days ago. The eyes that had trembled in confusion in front of the bank kiosk. And the very eyes that had smiled contentedly while eating wonton mee at the hawker stall. "Oh, Uncle!" A surprised exclamation burst from Serene's lips before she could stop herself. Her mind went blank. What was this situation? Why was that elderly man sitting here? Serene couldn't comprehend anything for a moment. The gentleman was equally stunned. His hand, bringing the teacup to his lips, froze in midair. The teacup tilted slightly, and a drop of tea fell onto the tablecloth. But the gentleman didn't even seem to notice. His eyes wide, he stared intently at Serene's face. "Ah, aren't you the wonton mee young lady from that day?" In this unexpected reunion, the two stood frozen, staring at each other as if petrified. A silence, as if time had stopped, filled the room. Meanwhile, Marcus and his mother, sitting next to them, blinked in confusion, not understanding what was happening. "Father, do you know Serene?" Marcus asked, looking back and forth between his father and Serene. At that question, the gentleman seemed to come back to his senses. He placed the teacup on the table and rose abruptly from his seat. Then, he let out a hearty laugh. "What a twist of fate! Ha 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 ha!" The gentleman's laughter filled the room. The formal and quiet atmosphere of the parents' dinner was instantly overturned. The gentleman walked around the table towards Serene, spreading his arms wide. "This young lady is the very savior who saved my life that pre-dawn morning and even gave me taxi fare. Marcus, this is the young lady I was talking about." Marcus's eyes widened. His mother also brought a hand to her mouth in surprise. "The person you were talking about, father, was Serene?" "Yes, that's right. This young lady is the one who rescued me from the thugs in the alley, and also helped me when I was flustered in front of the machine at the bank, and we even shared wonton mee." At the gentleman's excited voice, Marcus looked at Serene with an incredulous expression. Serene still stood there, dazed. It felt unreal. The humble old man she had shared warm wonton mee with at the hawker stall a few days ago was Marcus's father? Memories from the past few days rapidly replayed in Serene's mind. The moment she helped him up in the alley. The moment she lied about her night shift allowance while giving him taxi fare. The moment she helped him with the kiosk. The moment they sat side by side, eating wonton mee. In all those scenes, the old man was now standing before her, impeccably dressed in a suit, calling her his savior. Marcus's mother rose from her seat, clasped Serene's hands, and her eyes welled up. "Oh my, is this true? My husband told me how grateful he was that day. He kept lamenting that he couldn't even ask for the young lady's name, saying she even gave him taxi fare." The atmosphere in the room instantly changed. The intense tension that had frozen the air just moments ago disappeared, replaced by a surge of warmth. Marcus lightly patted Serene's back with an emotional expression, and the gentleman repeatedly exclaimed, "What a twist of fate!" unable to stop smiling. But as the wave of happiness passed, a sharp pain began to spread in Serene's heart. This warm, elderly gentleman, who called her his savior and smiled so brightly, those sincere eyes that had just welcomed her warmly. In front of him, Serene now had to lay bare her humble and miserable reality. That she had no money, that she had debts, that she had to care for a sick brother, and that she was on the verge of being fired from her job. The words she had said to Marcus in the rain came back to her. "If I'm by your side, I'll ruin your life too, Marcus." Thinking that she had to repeat those words now, in this place, in front of these people, made her chest ache as if it were being squeezed. The resolve to retreat as if fleeing now became an even more unbearable pain, catching Serene's breath. If this person had been a stranger, she could have simply greeted them and withdrawn cleanly. But the very savior who had held her hand in the alley, the very elderly gentleman who had praised her at the wonton mee stall, was her father-in-law. In front of this miraculous connection, Serene couldn't move a single step, feeling as if fleeing would be an insult to the person who had shown her such kindness. Serene exhaled a trembling breath through her tightly clenched lips. The strap of her bag was slippery with sweat, and her knees were trembling. Behind the miraculous joy, the weight of the truth Serene had to bear loomed even heavier. How many minutes had passed since the miraculous joy filled the room, while the gentleman repeatedly exclaimed, "What a twist of fate!" In awe, and Marcus's mother clasped Serene's hands, her eyes welling up. A cold needle incessantly pricked Serene's heart. Serene, gripping her trembling legs, slowly rose from her seat. The atmosphere in the room changed. A look of puzzlement crossed the faces of the gentleman and Marcus's mother, who had been smiling brightly just moments ago. Marcus, too, seemed to have noticed Serene's change, looking at her with worried eyes. Serene, clenching both fists, spoke in a trembling voice. "Father, mother, I apologize." At Serene's first words, the room fell silent. The air, which had just been filled with laughter, instantly grew heavy. "I am, in fact, very poor." Uttering that single sentence required all of Serene's strength. Her throat felt parched, and her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. But Serene didn't stop. She felt if she stopped now, she might never be able to say it. "I have a sick younger brother to take care of. He's had a weak heart since birth, and the hospital bills and medication costs every month are honestly too overwhelming to handle." Serene's gaze fell to the floor. The luxurious tea set and neatly arranged napkins on the table caught her eye. But to Serene, they felt like objects from a world too distant from her own. And now, I'm on the verge of being fired from my job. That day, the very act of helping father was twisted into a false report, accusing me of using excessive force. The father of those men is an influential figure in the area, so even the station inspector told me to resign, or else he would terminate me. If I'm fired from the police force, I'll have nothing left. Serene's voice trembled faintly. She clenched her fists until her fingertips turned white, but she couldn't stop trembling. I don't know if I even have the right to be here. Marcus deserves someone much better than me. I don't want to be a burden in Marcus's life. That's why I came here today to tell you honestly. Serene bowed her head deeply. She couldn't continue speaking. Her throat was constricted, preventing the next words from coming out, and something hot welled up in her eyes. But Serene bit her lip, determined not to cry in this place. A heavy silence descended upon the room. It was a suffocating stillness, as if even the steam rising from the teacups had vanished. Marcus bit his lip tightly, looking at Serene's back, and his mother clasped her hands, watching her husband's face. Just then, a warm, thick hand settled on Serene's bowed head. Serene looked up in surprise. The gentleman had risen from his seat and was standing in front of Serene, and he was holding Serene's rough, small hands firmly in his own large, warm hands. Just as Serene had placed 2 $10 notes on the old man's palm and covered them with her hands in the alley a few days ago, now the gentleman was holding Serene's hands in the same way. What nonsense are you talking about? The gentleman's voice was low but firm. It was an unwavering voice, without a hint of tremor. That precious heart you showed me that day, it is a blessing for our family. Serene raised her head. Their eyes met. In his eyes, there was no pity or sadness, but only deep respect and gratitude. What crime is poverty? Is it shameful to have no money? No, it's shameful to sell one's conscience for money, and to bow one's head before power. You did neither of those things. The gentleman squeezed Serene's hands even tighter. Most people would see an old man being assaulted in the early morning and pretend not to see. But you stepped in, knowing the danger, and took out your last bit of money from your empty pocket to give to me. To have a daughter-in-law like you, I am honored. At the gentleman's final words, the tears Serene had been holding back overflowed her eyelids. As one tear streamed down her cheek, an unstoppable cascade of tears followed. His mother, standing nearby, also rose and warmly embraced Serene's shoulders. Serene, to think that the person who saved my husband was you. We are truly blessed. Thank you. Thank you so much. In her mother-in-law's embrace, Serene could no longer hold back and sobbed silently. She had expected to be coldly rejected at this gathering today. She had thought she would be sent away coldly because of her poverty, because of her debts, because of the threat of losing her job. But what she received in return was not rejection, but a single word: blessing. The heavy burdens Serene had carried for so long were accepted lightly by these people, as if they were nothing. Just then, amidst her overflowing tears, a loud ringtone blared from Serene's bag. It was a sharp, noisy sound, completely out of place in the formal parents' dinner setting. Serene quickly wiped her tears and fumbled through her bag. The moment she saw the name on her phone screen, Serene's expression turned to stone. Station Inspector. Serene's hand reflexively moved towards the call reject button. She couldn't take this call in this situation. But before Serene could press the button, the gentleman's low voice was heard. Answer it. Serene looked up. The warm smile that had been on the gentleman's face moments ago was gone. Instead, his eyes were filled with a steely glint she had never seen before, neither at the hawker stall nor in the alley. Put it on speakerphone. The gentleman's voice was quiet, but the weight it carried seemed to crush the entire air in the room. Serene, not understanding why, pressed the answer button with trembling hands and turned on the speakerphone. As soon as the call connected, the station inspector's shout filled the room. Serene Elim, are you still not listening? Serene's shoulders flinched at the voice. Marcus's expression instantly hardened, and his mother looked at the phone with a surprised face. Get your butt over here right now and kneel before Mr. Lee. I told you to sort it out today, didn't I? If you don't come by today, my police career is over. Do you hear me? Over. The station inspector's voice was almost maniacal. His cruelty, uttering words that would control a person's life so carelessly, spread entirely through the speaker into the room. Serene's face turned white. The courage she had struggled to gather earlier seemed to shatter into pieces with that single shout. Who am I to challenge Mr. Lee's son? Who am I to do that? If you're not going to resign, I'll process your termination. Be warned. Do you understand? Serene bit her lip tightly. It was humiliating to hear such words in front of these kind people. She wanted to hang up quickly, but her hand wouldn't move. Her whole body was frozen stiff. Just at that moment, the gentleman snatched Serene's phone, as if catching it. It was the same hand that had warmly clasped Serene's just moments ago, but now it held an entirely different kind of power. The gentleman brought the phone to his ear and, in a low, resonant voice, uttered each word clearly and distinctly. "This is Lee Junwei. Former Attorney General Lee Junwei." The moment those 3 words echoed through the speakerphone, a complete silence fell from the other end of the line. Not even a breath could be heard. The harsh voice that had just been raised to crush Serene had vanished without a trace. The air in the room froze. The unassuming elderly man, who had smiled contentedly while eating wonton mee, was nowhere to be found. In his place stood a completely different person. His back straight, his chin slightly raised, his steely eyes gazing into the void. He exuded an overwhelming charisma that only someone who had fought injustice on the front lines of the law for decades could possess. "The PC you are threatening to terminate right now is my savior who saved my life." A gasp was cut short from the other end of the line. "And she is my daughter-in-law." The gentleman's voice was not a shout. Rather, it was much lower and quieter than the station inspector's earlier shouts. But the weight contained within that quietness was heavier than any shout. "I was the witness on site that day. Are you in your right mind? Is it the job of a station inspector to talk about termination for a legitimate law enforcement action backed by video evidence, which involved subduing individuals who assaulted an innocent old man and extorted money from him in the pre-dawn hours?" Each of the gentleman's words was as sharp as a blade. Everyone in the room held their breath at the heavy voice flowing through the speakerphone. Marcus's eyes were wide at this never-before-seen side of his father, and his mother watched her husband's back with a composed expression. To think that a station inspector would sacrifice a junior officer to curry favor with an influential family. A small, whimpering sound escaped from the other end of the line. It was impossible to tell if it was a gasp or a gasp of shock. "By tomorrow morning, restore all unjust measures against PC Serene Lim to their original state." The old man who looked insignificant in his worn jumper, who was being assaulted in the alley, the old man who was flustered in front of the kiosk, the old man who smiled simply while eating wonton mee at the hawker stall. The fact that this old man was, in fact, Lee Junwei, a giant who had commanded Singapore's legal circles, was finally revealed to the world at this moment. Understood. The silence on the other end of the line was prolonged. After a long pause, the station inspector's voice was heard again, sounding like a completely different person. The frenzied shouts were gone, replaced by a thin voice trembling with fear. "Former Attorney General Lee Junwei." Is that Junwei didn't respond to the station inspector's stammering. Instead, he coldly delivered his final words. "Otherwise, I will act myself." Junwei ended the call and quietly placed the phone on the table. Silence returned to the room, but this silence was of an entirely different kind. If the previous silence had been the heavy quiet following Serene's confession, this silence was the calm after a storm. Serene stood there with a blank expression. Her mind understood what had just happened, but her heart couldn't catch up. The very elderly man she had lied to a few days ago, saying "I have some money because I got my night shift allowance," had just, in the name of a former attorney general, dismantled all the injustices that had sought to crush her, with a single phone call. Just as Serene's knees threatened to buckle, Marcus quickly grabbed her arm to support her, and Junwei came back to Serene's front, took her hand with a warm smile as before. The steely, knife-like gaze had vanished, and the eyes of the humble old man who had smiled while eating wonton mee at the hawker stall had returned. "Don't worry, Serene. Everything will be all right now." It was the moment the chain of unjust power that had bound Serene was broken with a single word. From that day on, the situation instantly turned. With Lee Junwei, the former Attorney General, a living legend in the legal world, stepping forward as a direct witness, things that had been hidden in the dark one by one were dragged into the light. The station inspector's corruption, his collusion with the local businessman, and his history of quashing investigations were all exposed. And that wasn't all. The assaults and extortion committed by the local businessman's sons and the systematic cover-up of those acts all came to light. Junwei was retired, but the network of legal contacts and trust he had built over decades had not rusted. An internal investigation began, and the station inspector was relieved of his duties. The local businessman and his sons were charged with aggravated robbery and criminal intimidation. Those who had threatened Serene to resign and yelled at her to kneel were now forced to kneel before the law. Serene was completely cleared of the false accusations. On the contrary, her courageous actions were re-evaluated, Her fellow police officers lined up to greet Serene as she entered the NPC entrance. They were the very colleagues who had averted their gazes and watched silently that day. With faces mixed with apology and shame, but with genuine sincerity, they applauded Serene. A senior officer approached Serene and bowed his head. "Serene, I'm sorry. We should have said something then. We were cowards." Serene shook her head and smiled. "No, sir, it's all in the past." At that single sentence, the senior officer's eyes reddened. Looking at him, Serene once again felt that this uniform was not a symbol of shame for her, but a symbol of pride. Serene confirmed with her whole being, right there, that the word integrity written in her father's notebook was not wrong. But Junwei had given Serene more than just rehabilitation of her honor. A few days after the parents' dinner, Junwei called Serene separately. He brought up the topic of her brother, Kai, whom Serene had been so worried about. "Serene, you mentioned your brother Kai. You said his heart wasn't well, didn't you?" Serene nodded with a surprised expression. She had only briefly mentioned it at the parents' dinner, but Junwei hadn't forgotten. "I have a junior colleague who is one of the top cardiologists. I've already contacted him. Take Kai to see him." Serene was speechless. Tears welled up in her eyes again at the offer to connect her with the best medical team for her brother's treatment. "Father, I don't know how I can ever repay such kindness." Junwei waved his hand, cutting Serene off. "Kindness? What kindness? The heart you showed that morning, that was kindness. Now, stop worrying about your brother and just think about your own happiness. I want to show you that the integrity I upheld was not in vain." Junwei's voice was gentle but firm. Within his words was a deep respect that went beyond mere material support, acknowledging Serene's worth as a person with all his heart. Under Junwei's steadfast support, Kai successfully underwent surgery. His heart, weak since birth, finally found a stable rhythm for the first time. The first message Kai sent Serene when he opened his eyes in the recovery room was, "Sis, I don't think I'll be sick anymore. Thank you, sis." Serene received that text and sat on a corridor bench, crying for a long time. They were tears of joy. Only Serene herself knew how long she had waited for that moment, how long she had dreamed of those words. The years she had sacrificed her entire youth for her brother's health, those times of terrible endurance, finally felt rewarded by this short text message. The day Kai was born, Serene had held her brother's hand, leaving the hospital entrance, and thought, "Now, I am no longer a victim of my brother's illness, but a person who can live her own life. A path has finally opened for me to walk for my own happiness, not to bear others' burdens." And time passed. Winter gave way to spring. On a bright day that spring, Serene stood in front of a mirror, dressed in a dazzling white wedding dress instead of her crisp uniform. The Serene in the mirror was a completely different person from the woman who had stood frozen in the middle of the road, soaked in rain, just months ago. Her vibrant eyes, her gentle smile, and the happiness overflowing in her heart. Serene smiled quietly at her reflection in the mirror. The splendid wedding hall was filled with the murmuring of guests. As Serene stood at the entrance of the aisle, the first thing that caught her eye was her father-in-law, Junwei, sitting in the front row, beaming with a contented smile. Dressed in a dignified suit instead of his worn jumper, his eyes, watching his daughter-in-law on her most radiant day, were full of a father's love. Beside him, her mother-in-law sat with tears in her eyes, and at the end of the aisle, Marcus looked at Serene. The very man who, in the rain, had cried, "Serene Lim, did you really see me as someone so weak?" and refused to let her go. Marcus's eyes grew redder and redder with each step Serene took, but he ended up smiling brightly. As Serene walked down the aisle, she recalled that dark alleyway from the past. At moments she encountered the biting wind in the pitch-black darkness of a winter dawn. She could have ignored the old man in danger and passed by. She could have simply gone home with her cold bento and curled up under a warm blanket. That would have been the usual choice. But Serene had stopped. She had put her plastic bag on the ground and walked into the darkness. That brief moment of courage, that one step that pre-dawn morning, was what made Serene who she was in this moment. What Serene had placed on the old man's palm that day was not just two $10 notes. It was a warm heart that couldn't ignore the pain of others, a sincerity that knew how to share even when she had little, and a small spark named integrity inherited from her father. Those small, natural acts of kindness, like seeds, had grown and returned as the warmest hands, saving Serene's life when she was on the brink. Serene tightly clasped Marcus's hand. Marcus's hand was as warm as it had been in the rain that day. Feeling the overflowing happiness deep in her heart, Serene looked into Marcus's eyes. The sound of blessings and applause filled the wedding hall. In the front row, Her father-in-law Junwei clapped loudly, and beside him, her mother-in-law wiped away tears, smiling. Kai, now healthy, also watched his sister's most radiant moment from a corner of the audience, smiling brightly. A very small act of warmth extended to others ultimately becomes a miracle that melts away the coldest season of my life. Serini deeply etched this precious sentence into her heart as she took her first step towards a dazzling future with Marcus. Thank you for watching today. Today's story began with a chance encounter between an old man and a young police officer in a pre-dawn alley. A single act of courage, refusing to turn away from someone's pain, completely transformed both their lives. Serene and Mr. Lee showed us that no matter how cold and unfair the world may be, a sincerely extended hand will always come back. If today's story resonated with you, please subscribe and like. And we would be grateful for your encouraging comments for our protagonists. Wishing you all a slightly warmer day, this has been Life's Journeys.